Okay, welcome. Good morning and good afternoon and good evening for the people in Europe. This is Michael Check from Linkage Design. Joining me is Dawn McArdle.
Hello.
So, welcome to the first in a series of 3 webinars on the subject of VRED. And appreciate you guys all joining. I've got a couple of things that we're going to do to kind of get things started. So we're on for an hour, and just from a logistics standpoint, I'll just kick things off here for the first 6 to 7 minutes. Then we'll launch into Dawn's technical presentation of VRED. And then at the end, for the last 10 to 15 minutes, we will answer questions. So logistically, you can, there's on your control panel, you'll just see the questions tab. Click down on the questions tab. Send me the question. I'll tabulate them, and then I'll share them with Dawn, and then we'll attempt to address all of them. Now, if we don't get to all the questions, or if there's some questions that we may not be able to answer in this session, we can certainly email you back with the question, or if there's something that we can't answer right away, we'll get the information and then email you back. So, you know, from our standpoint, you can also email me or Dawn, so I'll give you our email addresses. So I'm mcheck@linkage-d.com, and then Dawn's is dawn@linkage-d.com. So if there's something that you see that you want to ask questions on a one-to-one basis or whatever, then it's totally cool. You can do that. We're also recording the session, so we're going to have the session recorded. We'll be able to then send you a link that you can use to kind of go through on your own or share with anybody else. Yeah. Okay, cool. So we've got the questions things done. Oh, okay. So the next sessions, these will be every 2 weeks at the same time and on a Thursday. So the next session is May 29th, and we will send a message out to everybody as to what the subject matter is, but it's VRED related. And then the last one is on the 12th of June. Yeah? Okay, cool. So the other thing that I wanted to mention to you is there is a 30-day evaluation for VRED. So if you go to the Autodesk, so just go autodesk.com/VRED, you'll see that, and if you don't see it right away, you can always do a search on the website and you'll see that there's a 30-day evaluation. It would be kind of nice that if you haven't used it or played around with it, that you download the 30-day evaluation and kind of follow along with us, because our 3 sessions will be over an approximately 30-day period. And so your 30-day free evaluation will kind of cover the period of our 3 events, our 3 webinars. Okay? So, so that's it on the logistics. And as I said before, if you have questions, you can just send them to me and I'll take care of them. So just a little bit of background on Linkage Design. I started Linkage Design in 2009 with the intent to take good care of my customers and to take good care of my employees, and to really kind of like focus on digital design. So Linkage Design provides resources that work on site at our customers' locations. We also do some projects here out of our office in Royal Oak. And then we also do things like training. So we have a basic and an advanced alias training class. And we just recently did a VRED class. So there's more of that stuff. So if you have questions on training, things of that nature, email me, and we'll be able to take care of that. So, you know, we're now up to about 25 employees that are either here in our office in Detroit or working on site at different customer locations. Just a small little list of the customers we work with. We work with Visteon, we work with ASC, we work with Chrysler. There's a couple of other ones that we can't really mention, but we have now about 6 or 7 different customers that we do a variety of things, but it's mostly all focused on kind of like the digital design and alias related parts of our business. So that's the kind of the catalyst for starting the company. 18 months ago, we were certified as an Autodesk reseller. And so we now provide the Autodesk tools, and with the specialization on industrial design, which is the Alias products, and the visualization, which is VRED. So that's our forte. That's the things that we do. That part of our business is growing. But there again, we provide the software, we do the training, we help with loading the software and things of that nature. So we're kind of a full service provider when it comes to the Autodesk and Alias products. Okay? So, yeah. Okay, good. So what I'm going to do is turn it over to Dawn to talk specifically about the VRED product. And I'll just give you a little bit of background on Dawn. She's been in the digital design space really for really almost 15 years, almost 20 years.
Well, we're pushing it. You're giving away my age here.
Really started out using Maya, so she's been an expert Maya user over the years. She worked at Home Run Pictures from 1995 to 99, and then went to GM from 99 to 2007. And at GM, she was the visualization. She was the Maya animation lead. So helped with a lot of the traditional animation and visualization at GM. Took some time off for a family, so now has kind of re-entered the workforce and has joined us at the latter part of 2013, and has come aboard with Linkage as our VRED technical specialist. So she's going to give you an overview of the product, but also her perspective on being a Maya user, and then how that's helped her transition into be a VRED user, and then some of the things that she saw in Maya that she couldn't do that she can do now in VRED and things of that nature. So there you go. Thank you.
Okay. Am I presenting?
I'm going to switch you over to the presenter right now.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Mike. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. This afternoon, I'm going to give you a very basic overview of the features in VRED Professional. On my screen here is the HyperRod designed by Mark Mainville. It is being rendered using OpenGL. The shadows are pre-calculated as opposed to using ray tracing, which would provide physically based shadows, reflections, and refractions. And I'm using the default studio environment. So I'm going to show you this project that I have set up for presentations. And you can see in OpenGL, we've got real-time rendering. It's real fast. You might have a bit of a lag in your playback compared to what I'm seeing on my screen. After this, I'm going to walk you through how to begin setting up the staging for presentations and rendering. If I stop navigating with my mouse, you can see that anti-aliasing kicks in, which I do have activated. Or do I? Let me double check. Oh, I don't. I'm going to turn that on, go back to full screen. And when I stop navigating with the mouse, anti-aliasing kicks in. And this is what we refer to as still frame mode. Also, when you write out a render, that uses still frame mode. The other mode is interactive. And it's important to know this because you get to choose your ray tracing quality for each. Now I have this set up for presentations, so all I have to do is hit the keys on my keyboard to show, for example, paint color changes, camera view changes, interior material changes, and even environment changes. I'll go through a few of these just to give you an idea. You can combine different camera angles and different HDR settings, backgrounds, and get a nice variety of looks. And the HDRs are the sole provider of lighting in my scenes and reflections and refractions. And these are collections that we've bought. I'm going to go out of this, and I want to show you the difference between OpenGL and ray tracing. I have this animation I completed with ray tracing on and full global illumination. And you can see all the true reflections and refractions that are created on the car paint and the glass and the mirrors. Okay, so let's get started on a brand new project. I'm going to go to File, Open, and I'm going to open this generic sports car exterior. And as you see my drop-down menu here, there are a lot of different native formats to choose from. You can bring math into VRED. This one happens to be an FBX. I'm going to open this exterior. And a dialog box is going to pop up. I'm going to keep all the default settings, except I'm going to uncheck Keep Surface Data. Say OK. I want to mention that depending on your computing power, you may want to work with ray tracing on. It will be a bit slower, but you will get realistically calculated shadows and reflections. I'm running a Dell Precision laptop with 8 gigs of memory, running Windows 7. And ray tracing in VRED is dependent on the CPU, not the GPU. In other words, it's hardware dependent, not graphics card dependent. So here's my exterior. And then this is the scene graph, which I'll get into more detail in a bit. Your imported math will show up in green. And if you hit F, that will fit it to your screen, fit what is selected full screen. Next thing I'm going to do is add my interior. And this interior is a 3DS format. Keep the same settings and import that. You can't see it because the interior is, of course, inside the exterior. But here it is. If I isolate this, and you can do that either by just dragging it onto your render view or hitting the isolate button, and whatever is selected will be isolated. So I've got my interior and my exterior. And they aren't too pretty yet, but we will take care of that. But first, there's some housekeeping to do. Before I get to that, let me give you an overview, a tour of the interface. At the very top is your version. I'm running version 2014 SR1 SP5. And if you have used VRED and have any problems getting some of the dialog boxes, for example, when you drag and drop your textures, then that may be because you don't have the service pack installed. Just something to note. Below that is your menu bar. Each one of these has drop-down menus of related tools. And below that is your icons bar, which shows frequently used tools that you can quickly turn on and off, in addition to your open, add, and save. The main real estate of VRED is taken up by your render view, which is this big area here. And this is a visual feedback of your scene. Below that is your quick access bar, which is a tool set you can customize according to your personal preferences. We also have the status line here on the very bottom, which shows your information bar, which tells you if you have ray tracing or anti-aliasing on. It gives you an idea about your current memory consumption. And in addition to that is your terminal, which could be used for scripting, your feedback, and some other things like units where you can change it between centimeters and meters, your up axis, Y or Z, your near clipping plane, your far clipping plane, and your field of view. Now this here in the bottom right-hand corner, it says ICV. That stands for Initial Camera View. And that's nice because sometimes you'll bring in a scene and you won't know where your vehicle is. It could be out in space. So what you can do is set your initial camera view, go to a view that you like, and just hit ICV. And then no matter where you are, when you hit home or when you bring the file in, it will bring you back to that view. It's not quite the same as animation. We will go into setting keyframes in the next webinar. Okay, so let me talk a little bit about some of the windows that you'll use often. This is your materials editor, and we'll go into that in just a bit. You've also got your scene graph, which is a tree-like structure that shows the hierarchy of all the contents of your scene. And depending on what is selected, and by the way, you have an interaction of what's selected by either wireframe, bounding box, or both. You can use the slider here to expand and contract the contents of your scene graph. And the scene graph is where you're going to rearrange the grouping of your objects. For example, if you wanted to animate a car door shutting and then the vehicle moving, you would need all the door parts together, and then you would need them subordinated to the vehicle itself. So before I start making this pretty, let me show you some things that need to be done in the way of optimizing. So right now I've got my vehicle selected, and whatever is selected in the scene graph will be selected in your render view. If you right-click on anything in your scene graph, you get another whole set of menu options and tools. I'm going to go to Edit, Show Optimization Module. And in addition to the default tools that I'm going to also select Cleanup Group Nodes and Flush Transformation Nodes and Optimize. I can see it's doing something, so that's a good thing. So that's one of 3 places to optimize. Also, if you go under File, Optimize Scene, and there are 3 levels. I'm going to choose the last, which is Merge, Optimize, Share Geometries. I'm going to go ahead and say OK. It is making my file scene lighter, and it's telling me it removed 222 nodes. And finally, in your material editor, under Edit, you can optimize materials, which will delete duplicate materials, as well as optimizing textures. Now, I forgot to save this to show you the difference in file size, but I do know that before I optimized it was 102 megs, and now it's 75 megs. So that's a pretty significant reduction. So after optimizing, the next thing you want to do is make sure all your face normals and surface normals are pointing toward the camera. Right now, I'm in realistic rendering mode. I'm going to go to Vertex Face Normal Rendering mode. And you'll see everything changes pretty dramatically. Whatever is green means it is correct. Green is good. Green means all the face normals and vertices are facing the camera. But for those components you see that are beige, they need to be corrected. And it's very easy to do that. All you have to do is hit Alt on your keyboard and left click on the part. So I'm going to go through this vehicle quickly and correct all these so that they are facing toward the camera, which will give us realistic rendering when we are ready. And if you come from other software, you know that it's not as easy as just left click or alt clicking. It could be a lot more complicated. Oops. I just toggled something, but go through and fix these. Sometimes you've got to zoom in pretty close to get them. And another little trick is if you want to change your rotation pivot, you can double click with your right mouse button. And this doesn't change the pivot of my wheel, but now I can rotate based on the center of that wheel or Right now I just changed it to the center of my vehicle. And it makes its navigation nice and easy. A few more parts I'm going to correct. Get this front grille. So my exterior looks pretty good. And I'm going to zoom into the interior. And by the way, the 2015 version of VRED has what's called collision detection. And you can set it up so that you cannot have your camera go through the vehicle. And that's real nice if you're trying to do interior shots and you accidentally are moving through space that you couldn't do in reality. I'm going to change my field of view. You can do that interactively by middle mouse button dragging in your field of view, or you can just type in a number. You can type in 100, just so I can check and make sure that I don't have any faces or vertices that need to be corrected. And that looks good. I'm going to change my field of view back to 45. And while I'm in here, it's always a good idea to set a camera view so that you can quickly go to your interior. So once you do create a viewpoint, go to realistic rendering, see if that makes a difference. That saves the information of everything within your camera, including motion blur and depth of field and so on. There it is. Okay. So once you have your viewpoint, you can Control-R to rename it. I'm going to name that interior, even though it isn't the interior. I'm going to navigate back inside my vehicle so that I get a view of my IP. And instead of creating a new viewpoint, I can just right-click on it and set view it, and it's going to update. So now I can go between my home view and my interior, or as many viewpoints as you would like to set up. Next thing to do is to start shading this vehicle. And the place we do that is the material editor. Let me tell you what is in here. On the left hand is the list of materials that were imported with your scene. Below that, you can choose between libraries. And I'm going to open up my VRED library because that has some nice materials that we can use on our vehicle. And in the middle is the shader ball representation of those same labeled materials that are assigned to the vehicle. And once that gets loaded in, I'll show you that on the right-hand side is where you can adjust all the attributes of your materials. And if you come from Maya or another program where you know how long it takes to get a decent paint shader, you'll really like using VRED and seeing that there are a lot of paint shaders automatically included, and you don't really have to do a lot of tweaking to make them look good. Let me show you by starting to repaint this. I'm going to select my car door, and whatever is assigned to that is going to highlight in the column here, paint generic, as well as in the shader balls here. And rather than just, you can create a new one and reassign it, or you can just convert. I'm going to pick my paint generic, convert to true light material, and I'm going to choose a metallic car paint. I'm going to give it a nice red color, and I'm going to store that color just by clicking on Store, Accept. And the metallic car paint offers you a slate color. If you want the vehicle to be one color, then choose the same slate color as your base paint. If you want it to be a flop, you could choose a different color here in your slate. And this is our glass. I'm going to convert that to the true light material glass. There is a carbon fiber. I'm going to select what's assigned the carbon fiber. And you can always isolate this while you're working. If you don't want everything, you can select by shift clicking or dragging a box around with your shift. If you drag a box from opposite direction, it will also select your background elements or whatever is touching that box. So again, I'm going to select what's assigned. And I'm going to go to my VRED library and see all the materials available. There are carbon fibers, there are car paints, cloth and leather, environments, glass and gems, liquids, metals, miscellaneous, plastic, stone, and wood. And these are folders full of materials that are already created. And you can get an interactive preview before you even assign just by dragging it. Drag and drop to assign, or just drag it on. Don't drop it. There's 4 carbon fibers in here. And I like this carbon 2X. But since I did drop some of them on, it created extra materials in my scene that are not assigned to anything. So occasionally you want to go to remove unused materials, and it will clean that up for you. I'm going to turn isolate off, and there's one more material in this VRED library I would like to show you. And that is, there's a nice red acrylic that I like to use for my rear tail lights. And that's right here. So I'm going, since it's already selected, I'm going to say apply to selected nodes. You can see how quickly our vehicle is starting to change and look a bit more realistic. And I did want to also mention that since the glass that we assigned is black, it is keeping some of the same attributes that were brought in with this scene. To save some time, I'm going to go ahead and open a scene where I have refined the materials to a level that is a bit better than this. And doing your staging with the materials is the part of this process that's going to take the longest. But once you get materials that you like, you can save them out into libraries and reuse them over and over. You can see I've got some of my own personal libraries I've created for car paints and interior materials. And really, if you have something that looks great, you only ever have to create it once. So I'm going to adjust my lighting by bringing an HDR image and dropping it on my dome. This is a dome, or as my son refers to it, the force field. And the dome and the shadow plane automatically come in with every scene. You also get your root node, which is always at the top and cannot be deleted, and you get your 4 cameras. So all you have to do is, there are so many things in this program that are just drag and drop. It's really, there's many ways to do the same thing, but I'm going to go to my texture folder that's right on my desktop, and I'm just going to drag my HDR, high dynamic range image, right on top of my dome. It's going to give me some options, and I'm going to click Add, which means I have the option of keeping my studio environment and toggling between it. So right away, you can see it looks a bit different, but I don't see the reflections happening, so I'm going to have to tell my materials to use that HDR. Give it a second to update. So the HDR provides all the lighting, and in addition, you can add your own lights like directionals, points, and spots. So the material editor holds not only your materials, but also your environment. I'm going to find that environment, and I'm going to right-click and say Apply Environments to All Materials, and just click OK. And then, did you see that? Now, you can toggle between your studio and your HDRI. And you can put as many in here as you want. Now, what I would advise is not to go off-roading here with your vehicle, but and not move your vehicle, but to move your texture instead. Because if you bring in parts or other vehicles to replace this, then you're just going to have some problems with getting everything positioned. So to do that, click on your texturing, and then you get this nice widget where you can shift, translate, and rotate. I'm going to put the car right on the road here, move it over just in case any other traffic happens to come down. And it's as easy as that. The other thing I want to do is transform my dome. So the dome is something that has translation qualities as well as the texture on it. So you've got to make sure you have the right thing selected. And for this, I'm going to go into my transform box, and I'm going to turn off uniform, and I'm going to just scale it in a bit. So it looks like my road goes on and on much longer than it actually does. And the reason to do this setup is later on, if you want to add motion blur, it's going to add motion blur to whatever you have motion on. So sometimes you want to keep your vehicle in sharp focus, but you want your background blurry and your wheels blurry. So let me show you a couple images I threw out to my render last night. And that is in my webinar folder, images. So here's what I'm talking about. Sometimes you might want to keep your vehicle in focus, but I've got motion blur on my wheels and my background, and that's kind of a nice cheat because your HDR isn't always as crisp and clean as you might want. And there's a side view of the same thing. Okay, so it looks pretty good, but the thing that is bothering me now is it looks like it's floating. There's no shadow. And if you're going to work in OpenGL, you can kind of fake the shadow by using what's called ambient occlusion. So that is under Scene. Ambient occlusion is your box where there's some settings. Direct illumination is what we're interested in. That adds the nice dark shadows that is similar to what you would see on an overcast day into the cracks and crevices. Indirect illumination, I'm going to disable that because that brightens parts and we don't need that. And subdivision, I would advise to keep that off unless you need it. And doing this locally as opposed to globally will not only save time for the calculation, but will also keep your file size lighter. I'm going to start by picking only my shadow plane. I'm going to show you the difference between subdivision being on and off. So right now, if I calculate all and go out of realistic rendering mode and go to ambient occlusion rendering, you can see that I've got this shadow on my ground plane. But if I zoom in close, you can see that it's a little choppy, it's a little rough. So this is a case where you would want to add subdivision. So I'm going to put that on medium and recalculate just my floor. I don't have the vehicle selected yet. That's just going to take a moment. And you can see how that's just smoothed out my floor. And when I turn on my wireframe, you can see that the subdivisions were added only where they're needed. So after you do that, you would want to select your vehicle. And for the exterior, I would keep the same settings with only direct illumination on. And 1 and 3000, which are the default settings, are good for exterior. For interior, you want 1 and 500. And if you do see some surfaces that need subdivision, then I would suggest to do those on an as-needed basis. And by the way, you do not need to hide the glass, as you might in some other software. The ambient occlusion will be calculated right through the glass. Some people call this baking shadows. So I'm going to go and open a file where I've already calculated ambient occlusion to save a little bit of time. And for this scene, it takes about 12 minutes. If you were to keep subdivision on, it takes about an hour. And I'm going to go back to realistic rendering. And let me show you a few things about texturing. So we've got our materials on, and to refine a bit more, we want to add some textures. So I've got a license plate, I've got a plastic material assigned, and I'm just going to drag and drop that texture from my desktop right on there and add it as diffuse. If you select object only, it's going to only add this texture to the object I clicked on. But I'm going to edit material instead, and since this same material is assigned to my front and rear plates, it's using the UV parameters to assign it based on the size of the length and width. And I've also got this handy-dandy linkage logo. I'm just going to drag that right onto my door. And for this one, I'm going to select Add as Decal. And if you do race cars or sporty cars and you want decals, you can add as many as you want, and they are layered onto the same material. It's turning my car paint into what's called a multipass, which is a layered material with my paint and my decals on top of it. I've got a little drop-down box which gives me the option of use alpha channel. Since I don't have one in this particular texture, I'm going to say use as opacity map. And you do get a preview before you make your selection. So I'm going to use as opacity map, and I'm going to add to material, say OK. And what the opacity map does is it uses the black and white information for transparency. And then you can interactively place this and scale it wherever you like. I'm going to scale this up a bit with Shift on my keyboard. I'm going to move it down. And one thing to remember about decals is by default they come in as a plastic material. Realistically, they would be painted on. So all you've got to do to correct that is find your decal and go to Create, Convert, Convert to Trilight Material, and then select. I'm going to select Metallic Car Paint. And then you can see how now it's picking up the highlights just like the red car paint is. Okay, how many minutes do we have?
You have 5 minutes.
5 minutes is just enough time to show you how I set it up so you have different paint options. So right now I've got this multipass assigned to my vehicle, and within it is the decal. I'm going to select my original red paint, and I'm going to duplicate that. And this time I'm going to give it a different color. We'll say blue is good. And if you don't, like I said before, if you don't change the flake color, then you get a flop. So let's do that. We'll just leave that as a flop. And to be organized, you're going to always be renaming. Okay, name this paint flop, and I'll name this paint red. And I'm going to create another True Light material. This is the unicolor. I'm going to make that white, and that's just a different option that doesn't give you the flake option, but it does give you an orange peel option. I'm going to name that one Paint White. And this is in alphabetical order, so it's easy to find your paint. I'm going to change this to materials, and here's all my paints right here. Now the next thing to do is create what's called a switch. And I'm going to middle mouse drag, which will replace all the paint currently assigned. That looks silly, but we didn't put anything into the switch yet. So now all you've got to do is drag your paint into the switch. Got paint flop, paint red, and paint white. There we go. So now, when you click on each of these options, your paint color changes. You can have as many in here as you want. You can update them, and it updates. I'm going to take that one step farther and show you how to set that up in what's called a variant set, so that if you're doing a presentation, you don't have to show so much of your interface. I'm going to open up my VSets, and there are all different types of tabs where you can enter information that can change. For example, in the Geometry tab, you can enter different wheel options and bring in different physical math. In the View, you can change your camera view and your HDR. Animation, you could have a vehicle moving forward and backward. And all these things you can click on with your keyboard shortcuts with nothing else open but full screen. So in my Material tab, I'm just going to drag and drop my switch material. Oh, first I've got to be organized and create a new group. And I'm going to call this Color Options. And within that, I'm going to do a new set, Control-R rename, and I'm going to do Paint. And now I'm going to drag my switch into here. And in the drop-down, I'm going to say Next Loop, which means it will show one paint color under the next. And the last step to do is go under your General tab and assign a particular hotkey that you want to press to make this change take place. I'm going to say number 1. Now when I press 1 on my keyboard, let me close down this other stuff, go full screen, my paint color is changing. So this has been really a basic way of showing you some of the things you can do and set up really quickly in VRED. In the following weeks, I'd like to get a bit more into showing you how to do animation and other ways of setting up for presentations. But before we go, I want to open this discussion up for questions.
Yeah, okay, great. That was fantastic. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So just a little bit of history on this. As we said, Dawn joined us in the fall of 2013, and her learning process was based on a couple of approaches. One was just playing around with the software. 2, there were a number of links for training videos that she found, and she has that information for all of you as well that she can share with you if you like. She became proficient in it pretty quickly. What would you say, 30 days?
Yes. Well, you wanted me to have something to show within 2 days for my interview, and I did.
Yeah. And so it does show you that the ability to get up and running and do some things quickly is there. I mean, obviously, the one thing that you'll find with VRED, a little bit of history on it, it's a product that was developed by a company called PIVR, which was based in Berlin, Germany. That company and the technology was purchased by Autodesk almost, well, a little over a year ago. So as you can see, it's got a very still German feel to it. There's a lot of functionality. There's a lot of depth to it. The values that you see in it from a usability standpoint is that it uses CPU technology instead of GPU. So you see that it's more CPUs, the more cores you have on your machine, the better it is. As Dawn said, she's working with a Dell laptop, and it's got a legitimate graphics card in there, but I think it's an NVIDIA 3000 or a Quadra 3000, which is good, but it's not your high end. So you can see that you get good performance on it. Switching to ray tracing mode gives you really good accuracy. It's going to slow things down, but it allows you to get good imagery, and you've got a number of other things, global illumination and things like that you can look at to use as options for viewing, which we're going to get into further as things move on. Yeah? So a couple of the questions that came up we want to pose. So one of them was, one of the attendees said he's interested in the metallic paints in VRED. So do you want to address that?
Sure. And I did want to mention also that I did turn on ray tracing, and you can see it looks a bit different. You can see that we've got 6 minutes and 4 seconds remaining. My computer's overloaded. So you do have those shadows if you don't want to bake your ambient occlusion. So I'm going to turn off ray tracing, and I'm going to talk a bit about the paints that are offered. Within VRED, you've got your unicolor card paint, and all these attributes can be adjusted. Your base color, of course. Your clear color, you usually want to keep that white because that just means the color of your reflections. Your reflectivity level is 0.4, and these are based on true Fresnel reflections and refractions. And I should mention that in version 2014, which is what I'm using, you do want the double-sided glass. But in the next version, you will be able to work with single-sided glass, and that will automatically calculate those refractions correctly for you. So in addition to the unicolor, which is kind of your basic paint, there's also a metallic. And the main difference is this offers a slate color. So let me zoom in and show you the flakes. And you can change the scale of that. Can you kind of see that flake? There it is. So the metallic offers you the flake. And there's also the flop, which offers you a few more options. And then let's see, there's some pre-created ones in the VRED library. Go back to my libraries. So it's kind of the same three, but they're already pre-created. So I'll drag a few of them on here so you can see. These are the flops, and then go to the metallic tab, and there's basic and special. You could spend all day just getting what looks right. And of course, depending on your lighting and your environment, each one's going to look different. And if those aren't what you're looking for, then you can always go into the attributes and adjust them to your own needs.
Okay, cool. So the other part of that question, which what other devices can you use to scan material in? So you know, X-Rite spectrophotometer, the ME98 is supported. We also know that X-Rite bought a company called Sensible. So with the X-Rite, you have the VRDF file format. Now with Sensible, they have what's called a BTF file, and that is basically the color, textures, flop. It's a much more advanced file format. So VRED does support the BTF file format. We can certainly share with you more information on that subject because it's a pretty extensive subject. We have been working with other companies. We've shown this to VRED, who does quite a bit of research in this space. And I know James Cronin has been working with them as well. So we can share more of that information with any of you who are more interested in what's going on there. So I've got some additional questions that I just wanted to look at. And so one of the questions that came, which is an interesting one because importing files, as we talked about, you know, the housekeeping of getting files into VRED is different from the artistic point, right? So you've got bringing files in, once you get them in, and you can color them up and things like that. So one of the questions was, does the grouping name structure does the grouping information when you import a file come in from the original database? So
that's a great question, and I do know that in the next version, 2015, the alias layers will come in the same as the way you save them out. And there's another program, but I have to get back to you which one that was. But you can see here that for my FBX, there is some labeling that did go on, that did come in. And it really is dependent on the format, because some I've brought in and there aren't materials assigned, and some there are, and some there is not what makes sense to me in the scene graph, but maybe it was never saved out that way. But the short answer is yes, there are some parallels, but there are also some restrictions. I think that you know, version 2015 is out now, And if you start with that, you'll probably be a lot more happy than having to try to learn 14 and then figure out what the differences and improvements are between 14 and 15.
Good point. All right, so a couple of other ones here. I have, one of the questions was, where can we buy HDRIs, right? And we went through this as well, and I was just looking in my database, and I found the company. It's called Hyperfocal Design.
And we can send that out as a kind of email, too.
And we'll send you off the link for this. It's actually good. There's quite a variety of HDRIs. You can buy them as a package, so we bought a package of a number of different ones, and the package that we bought cost about $200, so it wasn't too bad, and there's actually some really good stuff in there. Okay. So I'll send that link out here to everybody after the session. One of the questions was, can we, I think what we'll do on the texturing is maybe save that till the next session. You know, the ability to drag and drop textures.
Tire textures?
Tire textures or interior textures.
Yes. Well, we started doing that with the logo, but there are all kinds of deeper levels we could go.
Yeah, why don't we save that one till the next one? So you'll see in our next session, we'll get a little bit deeper dive on that, and we'll talk about interiors, textures,
yes,
placing textures on tire walls.
There's a really nice tire material I'd like to show you where if you have your tread texture and your sidewall, then you drag them both on and it automatically aligns it for you.
Cool. All right, so we've got 4 minutes, so we're complete with the first one. One of the things that we wanted to do was to ask a question to the group, and the first one who answers it, and so the answering process that you would use is Dawn will pose a question. The first one to answer correctly via the chat wins some linkage gear.
Yay!
So those are mugs, coasters. This package is a mug, coaster, and notebook with pen. So.
Okay. Now, is everyone paying attention? Here is the question. At the beginning of this presentation, I told you about a special little button that you could click, and once you set a view, that you could always go back to that home view. So tell me the name of that button and include the words that the 3 letters stand for.
Okay. So while we're waiting for an answer on that, I'll just give a little bit more information on VRED. So VRED Pro is the top line for this product, and it has a number of functions in it. And I can also send to everybody a list of functionalities for each of the versions of VRED. There's been some changes within Autodesk. So the new version of the high-end Alias product now is called Auto Studio. So we're back to the old naming. So there will be no more Alias Automotive. It is now called Alias Auto Studio, kind of back to the old days. So 2015 and forward is Auto Studio, and within the Autodesk world, there are kind of a packaging approach to things. So within Auto Studio, you get all of the functionality of Alias, plus you get Maya, and plus you get a copy of VRED Design. So that now comes with Alias Auto Studio. And so for anybody who was on maintenance and they had automotive prior, the transition is to 2015 Auto Studio, and therefore VRED Design comes with that product. And there's some major differences between VRED Pro and VRED Design. VRED Design doesn't allow you to do immersion, so you can't do VR. There's quite a few perceived quality or information that you can use in VRED Pro as opposed to VRED Design to evaluate surfaces and things of that nature. And then also in VRED Pro, you can render NURBS data directly. It's tessellated. You can't do that in VRED Design. Yeah. So I'm still waiting for somebody to answer the question, and I don't see anybody who has answered. Do you?
Well, I don't have that. I have full screen, but I can ask a different question if that one.
No one has answered it, so.
Okay, let's try another one then.
Okay.
Okay, what is the official terminology for baking shadows?
So, wait. Oh, hold on now. Okay, so the first person that popped up here who raised his hand was Kevin Prius. Yeah? Yes. Okay, so Kevin answered the question as ambient occlusion.
That is correct.
All right, so Kevin.
Congratulations.
And Daryl DeWin came in 1 minute after Kevin. So I think since they're so close, we're going to send out 2 packages.
Oh, that's so generous of you.
There you go. All right, so listen, very good. Well, we're exactly at 2:01, so we don't want to run over too much. So once again, just a quick little recap. We will be sending a recording of the session. I did send via chat the link to download the software. We will also share with you some of the HDRI sources that we have for buying domes and whatnot. And then if anybody has any further questions or more detailed questions on scanning technology, things of that nature, feel free to email us. And I've sent email addresses for me, Rita, and Dawn. Okay? Excellent. Very good. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Goodbye.